morning and welcome to Loxion News Table Talk. My name is Masebo and you warmly welcome to this first time broadcast of Loxion News Table Talk. Today we are at the CBD of Johannesburg. We are here at the offices of the PSC, the Public Service Commission. We are here to speak to the Gauteng Province Commissioner, actually the newly appointed Gauteng Commissioner for PSC, Mr. Vusimuzi Mavuso. This is stage. Good morning, Mr. Mavuso, and thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to speak to you.
A very good morning to you too, and thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to congratulate you because I've just heard that you've been appointed from January this year.
Oh, absolutely, yes. It's my new stint in the Public Service Commission.
Okay,
yes.
It's your new stint. I kind of doubt that, but nevertheless, can you maybe tell us what is PSC? Speak like to an ordinary member of the community who doesn't know what PSC. What is PSC?
Ooh.
Just in a nutshell.
PSC stands for a Public Service Commission. What it stands for essentially it is a champion, what you call a champion and the custodian of public administration excellence. What we do is to ensure that constitutionally entrenched principles and values are adhered to in the public administration. All the public servants throughout the entire broad spectrum of a public service have to adhere to this because these are in the Constitution. And for that reason, we also cater for a number of aspects. In other words, we do receive complaints, grievances through the what we call a hotline.
Okay.
That is a national hotline that anyone can be able to use at any given point in time and be able to raise their grievances or their complaints.
Especially when they have a problem with any government departments.
Whether it is in a hospital or home affairs and what have you, any issues that they may be able to have, it's for them to be able to raise them through that. Mm-hmm. And also we do afford them an opportunity to raise issues anonymously. If they don't want to be exposed, in time we would they should be known who they are and all that. We afford them that opportunity, and then we do our work to do those investigations.
Okay.
Others, of course, matters are in the public domain. They are free to come about and be able to clear or maybe to raise them with us, whether in this provincial office here or through the national office or any other place where they would want to raise those.
So does the PSC have offices in all 9 provinces of South Africa, or is just a number of provinces? Do you have representation offices across all the provinces?
Perhaps the starting point would be a Public Service Commission is a national body. Mm-hmm. It has representation in different provinces. For example, we do have what we call our head office, which is in Tshwane in Pretoria, where we have, in the main, we're supposed to be having 5 commissioners who are nationally based. Each one of the 9 provinces then comes up with its own nominated or interviewed commissioner, which means each province has its own office and its own staff complement and establishment. But we remain a national commission, regardless of the fact that we do have provinces where we operate in.
So in terms of complaints, do you stretch to receive complaints about parastatals? Can a person lodge a complaint with you about, say, for an example, the SAA or ESCOM?
Our stretch and our area of domain and responsibility stretches even up to the state-owned entities. It's part and parcel of our responsibility because we are a national commission, as I did indicate. I may not be the one who's going to do the investigations. We have commissioners who are assigned specific national departments to deal with those. I would be more concentrating in the Gauteng Province in the main. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't preclude us as a team would be able to look into all these particular matters because we've got streams as commissioners who are assigned different functions and responsibilities that we can be able to look into.
So in shortly, the process when somebody takes a phone and calls the PSC and say,
I suspect that there is an alleged corruption in Mfuleni local municipality. What is the process?
Ordinarily, if a person has a complaint or something to deal with municipalities, it may not necessarily be our purview as of now. As you know, that we do have 3 spheres of government, national, provincial, and local, and each one is distinct, but there's an interconnectivity between the 3. We would really be dealing with those that are within the 2 spheres, the national and provincial. Local, of course, there would be a point of referral to make sure that they're dealt with. However, the process of professionalization of the public service will then be able to allow us to have a stretch and a reach onto municipalities or local government as a sphere. Because as we talk now, there has been engagements with SALGA, so that at the point of dealing with the professionalization, we can then be able to deal with matters pertaining to the public servants in that sphere to ensure that we can be able to investigate if need be and be able to make or submit directives or make determinations as to what should happen thereafter. It's still part and parcel of a process because we are engaging around that, and hopefully by the end of this year we would have concluded that exercise and come up with an act of law which Parliament will have to approve to ensure that we can be able to deal with those matters. For now, I think our concentration will be in the 2 spheres, including the state-owned entities.
Okay. You once sat in the very same seat in 1999 when I did some research about you. I think for a year. And I understand now you've been appointed for a period of 5 years. So my question would be, what can an ordinary person expect from you as a commissioner of Gauteng Province for the next 5 years? What are you planning to do?
The seat may not be the same. However, at the point at which I was appointed in 1999, you will recall that it was at the formative stages of the Public Service Commission as a national commission. Previously, each one of the provinces had its own commission, independent, and there was nothing that really connected them to the national process. The new dispensation that started in 1999 in terms of the Act then created the framework whereupon we do have the National Commission, but of course having provincial offices interlinked. I spent a year during that period. To be frank, it was a formative stage in order to be able to find our feet as the commission.
Yeah.
But now that I'm here back into the commission, quite a number of changes have happened in the fullness of time. If you check what transpired in 1999 today, quite a lot has changed. But the mandate still remains the same. The changes that came about was in the how things were handled and dealt with. And to date, because of capacity and new approaches, technology coming into the equation and all that, the Commission has now changed in how it approaches these matters, and it has really done a lot of tremendous work. We've done quite a number of investigations. We've done what you may call unscheduled visits to the different institutions, hospitals, and different offices, police stations, just to check what they're doing without necessarily having to announce ourselves. And it has proven to be very, very good, because that in itself indicates that our presence is being felt. We've made submissions to the different legislatures, for example in Gauteng, to indicate what we found, what we've discovered to be flaws and weaknesses. And then as part and parcel of my exercise, having started this year on the 20th of January, I've had the benefit of meeting with the Premier of Gauteng. It was a meet and greet, but I've expressed what I've picked up as a matter of course, what needs to be done and all that. Last week or the other week, I met with the MEC of Health, and most of the problems would be coming from the health spectrum.
Yeah.
And I've indicated to her the concerns that we've identified, and be able to indicate what is it that we believe can be done. It's all about collaborating together and making sure that we can make a difference. Yeah. But more often than not, it's quite evident that you will find what I may call your recalcitrant public servants who do not necessarily want to adhere to the principles that are there. And of course, the weaknesses that have been identified is that they've found ways of bypassing the system to the extent that the accounting officers, their respective heads of departments, have not really been embarking aggressively in implementing consequence management. It's a flaw, it's a weakness, and of course we're holding them or taking them to terms to say that do your work or else. Remember, the Commission has what I may call teeth to bite. In as much as people may not necessarily know that. We have the power to can subpoena.
Oh, you can?
We can.
Just like the Gauteng legislature, because they can subpoena.
Just like the legislature can subpoena heads of departments to be able to account for their actions, failing which, if they don't, we lay a charge, a criminal charge. We do have examples in the Eastern Cape. One of the HODs was taken to task, and he came begging and pleading and literally crying because they never thought that we can be able to act it. So it's a tool, or maybe it's a remedial action of last course when we feel that people do not want to do their work. So we can do that.
So one of your mandate is to ensure that there's efficiency in governments, especially in departments and also in municipalities. I think you stressed to municipalities as well.
I said in the main, within the sphere of both national and provincial. I did indicate that the process of the professionalization of the public service in its broadest context will then extend to municipalities. So for now, it is not necessarily our expressed mandate. It's actually implied, but until such time that we clear those areas. I mean, you would have seen us being in municipalities if that was our area of domain and influence. But I did indicate that we have three spheres, national, provincial, and local, and each one is independent, although they're interdependent and interlinked. So if there was an issue around Mfuleni and all that, it will have to be referred differently and handled differently. But we deal with your provincial COCTA department that deals with municipalities and local government will then engage with them to be able to do what they need to do in that space. I'll give an example. As and when you do find flaws and weaknesses in municipalities, provinces will then be able to, or are expected to support those municipalities that are finding themselves in predicaments of being weak in whatever way that they may. And as a point of last resort, what is called Section 139 of the Constitution will be then instituted, whereby provinces will then intervene in the municipalities. You remember the case of Tshwane, when the municipality or the metro was under administration. It's the responsibility of the Department of Local Government in the province to handle those matters. It was not really necessarily our review.
But can myself as a business person, if I have a problem with my local municipality in terms of payment that has to be released within 30 days as stipulated by law, can I be able to take my phone and call the PSC and lay
you may, but remember, as I did indicate, we will have to make reference to the other sphere to be able to handle it that. But if it was in any of the provincial departments, I will just move without hesitation and make sure that we handle that matter. Talking about the 30-day payment or turnaround time, I think it's a standard that has been imposed upon all national and provincial departments to pay service providers within 30 days. It's something that we're following on, and we really are strong on that to say, why is it that you have not paid within the turnaround time that has been imposed upon yourselves? For us, it's an absolute necessity. And we found that in most instances, there has been compliance, precisely because they know that we can be able to rain upon them and be able to make those demands. But more can still be done. I still believe that they are still lagging behind in doing that.
I understand that you did one of the surprise visit to the one military hospital in Pretoria some time ago, and actually recommended that it needs to be refurbished and stuff. And as a result, there are plans to refurbish the municipal hospital, the military hospital. So my question would be, what about police stations? Because most of our police stations are in a very dilapidated state. And I normally ask myself, do you also stretch to do maybe those surprise visits to police stations and see, also to an extent, to see whether our police are actually doing their work, or are they just sitting there and not actually doing the work of policing?
I met with the team here, and we've outlined a process as to which areas would be our priority areas to be able to deal with some of the flaws and weaknesses that we've picked up. And I must indicate that we've actually agreed that we have to make what we may call blitz visits to these places when they least expect us to come. And the best time to go to police stations is not to go during the day. I don't want to take out our trade secrets, but there's a period when there's changeover of shifts, which normally happens between 6 and 7 o'clock in the morning. It's a very critical period because it's at that stage where you can be able to find station commanders, etc., who can then be able to be approached, because in most instances they would be hiding themselves. When you go to police stations, you want the station commander, they'll tell you, no, he's at such and such a place and what have you and all that. So when you go there, you'll be able to find them. It's quite important for us to be able to deal with those matters and ensure that those who are in senior positions, those who are in charge, should be accountable. And I'm sure we'll be making a number of visits in the not so distant future. In fact, starting from this month, we've outlined a program as to where we'll be heading to in order to ensure that we deal with these matters. Police stations, schools, but you see, most of the complaints that we've received to date since the beginning of the year have been around schools. You will recall that there was an issue pertaining to registrations of grade 1s and grade 8s.
Yeah.
The glitches may or could have been through the system that has been there. But there have been instances whereby some of the officials have really been bypassing the system and trying to locate or allocate those that they might have been friendly with, or whatever reason. Impressions, if impressions are anything to go by, there could have been exchange of rands and cents in order to expedite the location or the allocation to the preferred schools. And those are matters that we've been seized with. I'll be meeting with the MEC of Education and to be able to deal with some of the matters, to find out how best we can be able to deal with some of the lapse, should I call it, in systems.
On the issue of precautionary suspensions, in the last financial year, 2021 and 2022, your website reports that on the issue of precautionary suspensions, it amounted to over 25 million. With some people who've been suspended for days of up to 808 days, which is almost close to 3 years.
It's excessive, yes. To be frank, it's completely intolerable. Such a situation is unacceptable.
Because it halts the service delivery issue.
Because
a person is suspended on full pay and there's nobody to do his work at the office. So what is your intervention there? Do you normally speak to municipalities or departments and say, when a person is suspended on full pay, you need to close that gap by employing another person on his behalf? Or what do you do? Especially in a case whereby a person can be suspended up to 3 years.
If you look into the genesis of suspensions and how it comes about, a person would be found wanting for whatever reason, maybe accused of a particular misdemeanor. And instead of taking decisive actions on the spot, the person is then suspended, in other words, taken out of the system temporarily, so that an investigation should take place. The law is very, very clear. The Labour Relations Act is very clear on that. Suspensions can only be done up to a maximum of 60 days.
Okay.
In other 60 working days. Now, if it exceeds that, something is horribly wrong, which means the accounting officers in those particular departments, in other words, your heads of departments and what have you, are not doing their work. At the point of suspension, it means somebody has to do the work of the person who is suspended. You're going to pay what? Acting allowance. It's an additional expense. Yet there's a person whose substantive position, which is not necessarily where he's supposed to be there, is being done by somebody else. Yes. It can't be right. So if X, for argument's sake, is earning 800 rands, I'm just using that as an example, is suspended, there's a person who's earning 600 rand who acts in your position, which means in order to top up, that person has to be paid equivalent to what you were earning. which is another 800, which means you pay an extra 200 rand for this person to be able to act in your possession. If you take the sum total of what has been spent, it's 800 plus 200. It's about 1,000 rands which has been spent. It's unacceptable. It can really not be tolerated because suspension is only for 60 days. And what we've actually indicated, and you're correct to say that this is what is contained in the website, it's the totality of the public service. We've made a very strong call to say that starting from this month, all of those who've been on suspension must go back to work. And if you believe there's a case, charge those people, give them charge sheets, and let there be disciplinary action taken against them. It can't really go ahead like this. Yesterday we had a meeting, our first engagement with the new Minister of Public Service and Administration, because in most instances they would be the ones who are in charge of those particular processes. And we said, let those people come back and do their work. If you feel that they are not supposed to be there, charge them accordingly so that we can then be able to close the chapter. So once charged, cases must then take place. If the person is guilty, out of the system. If not, do the correct processes to handle those matters. This is our view, and I think we're going to prevail around it.
Okay. In last year, December 2022, you've received a number of grievances of complaints of about 490, including 150 of grievances which are actually carried over to the following year. Would you say the PSC National is under-resourced to handle all those grievances, or would you say South Africa, the country, is in a bad state whereby there are more complaints than good things that people can say about our departments?
In most instances, when we investigate or deal with those grievances, others have absolutely no merit. I'll give you an example. A person would complain or maybe come up with a grievance to say that I was not shortlisted when an advertisement was issued so that I can then be able to apply for that particular, or maybe be considered for the job. When we do the investigation, going through the processes, you find that the person does not have the suitable qualifications for the job. Now, imagine if you were to receive for one position, you receive about 100 who do not necessarily qualify because their qualifications may not necessarily be in line with that, or the number of years that are stipulated in the advert may not be commensurate to that, or it could be a variety of issues. Because if you check as to what happens when an advert goes out, which comes from government, in most cases you'd find that no less than 1,000 people would apply for that one position. Because there's unemployment, it's very, very high and all that. So everyone submits. Others are just submitting for the sake of submitting, even though they do not qualify. Now the numbers would then escalate. They would actually shoot up because you would have done your due process in terms of what the advert is indicating, but the numbers still remain. You have to investigate each and every one of those grievances. It may appear as a backlog. Yes, it is indeed, because once there's a backlog, it means capacity is required to can be able to deal with the demand. So it's the law of supply and demand. If the demand is high and then you have X number of employees, you have to deal with those matters. It can't really be reached. I'll give it a simple example. You saw how small our office is.
Yeah.
We have a staff complement of about 11 in total to deal with the entire province of Gauteng. Whereupon, if you were to take the Department of Health alone, I think it has no less than 5,000 employees. That one alone. And if you were to receive grievances from the Department of Health alone, and I'm excluding human settlement and these other departments, it's a humongous task. But of course, we are ready for the task and we'll do whatever we can under the circumstances. But capacity is still a requirement. We need more resources in order to can be able to expedite the resolution of grievances. So it's not because it's lack of wanting to resolve them. We tend to be overwhelmed. By the numbers, and sometimes they tend to be very disproportionate. There are instances whereby we do close complaints and grievances within a particular time frame, and By the time the year ends, there's no overlap that happens. I think it was quite exceptional when you look into the previous year and all that. Remember, there was a period when COVID was the order of the day, and most people were working from home for various reasons, and that created a backlog because it then overlapped into the other years. So that must be taken into account as a matter of course.
So, are your investigations done internally or externally? And how would you rate the efficiency of your investigations in terms of the complaints that you receive? How efficient are you? Are you happy with the state of your investigations, especially in this Gauteng province?
When you check into how thorough the investigations are conducted, and you look into the resources that we have, I think it's quite incredible because we don't outsource our function.
Okay.
We do it ourselves. I also get involved in the investigations. I also get involved when we do our spot checks, when we go to different places to go and investigate or maybe do visits where we are unannounced. So everyone has to put their shoulder on the work so that we can then be able to, all hands on deck, and we do our best to make sure that we can be able to deal with the challenges.
So when it comes to corruption, issues of corruption, when people are complaining about alleged corruptions, within departments of Gauteng, what are your normal outcomes? Do you normally draft a report, or to say, so that, as a matter of feedback to the complainant, what is your normal outcomes?
There are 3 levels at which we deal with that process. In the first instance, we have to respond to the complainant about what we have done around that. The complainant does get feedback. It's absolutely important because you need to know what has transpired with the matter that you reported. The second point, which are called checks and balances, would be the department involved. The accounting officer and the executive authority, in others, the head of department and the MEC in the province will have to be sensitized about that, and they have to take the necessary steps in order to deal with that corrupt activity. But it doesn't end up there. We submit our reports on a quarterly basis to the legislature to indicate that these are the trends that we've analyzed and this is what is happening. We do have what you may call serial offenders, and these are the departments that will have to be scrutinized. Quite clearly, we know who are our culprits in the different departments, and we do make follow-ups around those matters. Yes, indeed, those matters are followed up. We'll come up with directions to say, this is what we want you to do in order to resolve this matter. And some of the cases ended up in court, and people have been taken into task.
On the issue of whistleblowers?
It's a very delicate matter. It's a very sensitive matter because it requires a multiplicity of stakeholders to be involved. In the first instance, you require a measure of confidence to be able to say a person's anonymity would be guaranteed. That's number one. Number two, the justice system must be able to provide the necessary protection for that particular individual, which we cannot as the public service. Protection could actually imply that the person will have to...
But can you recommend to say...
We can, and
because we had an instance where somebody was killed who was a whistleblower.
Which was a very, very unfortunate thing. But of course, there are many others that have been happening that are unknown.
Yeah.
So it becomes important that the different stakeholders get involved in the process. Your justice system, in other words, your police, your courts, must then be able to provide security for those people. Once they've declared that there's information that is of this nature, please, I would need to be protected. There must be that process that is coming about. The Ministry of Justice is busy working on or finalizing the Protection of Whistleblowers Act. Our case, as the Public Service Commission, is that we would receive complaints or cases anonymously through the hotline. Once we receive that, we investigate the matter without disclosing the person's names and addresses and all that, which is quite crucial. But sometimes you reach a stage whereby, especially if it has to go to court, what do you do? Because the person has to give evidence. And it's more the reason why I said the justice system has to come into the equation so that the person can then be able to present the case in camera without necessarily having to be known as to who the person is. It's a very delicate matter. It requires a multiplicity of stakeholders to come on board. So we can't handle it all by ourselves.
As a commissioner yourself, as an ordinary member of the society, I would view you as a whistleblower indirectly. Would you say your life can sometimes be at risk for maybe pursuing some other investigations as a commissioner?
I haven't come to that stage yet to feel that I'm in danger or otherwise. I'm sure once we can come to that level, something will have to be done. But for now, I don't think I need bodyguards to protect me and be driven and blue lights. No, I walk freely, I go wherever I want to go. But of course, it's within a measure of caution that wherever I go, I must be mindful of what. I just have to exercise caution, whether I'm driving, whether I'm walking. I think it's quite important. Probably at the point at which there could be threats onto the lives of commissioners, something may have to be done. Yeah.
But we have never had such a case in South Africa?
So far, not that I know of.
Okay. My last question would be, what other areas of public service do you think maybe the PSC need to tap into? Maybe stretching, say, as time goes by, what other areas that you think maybe we should stretch to these areas as well as the PSC as time goes by?
You might have heard during interaction that I've been skirting away from local government because I kept on saying that we are responsible for these two spheres of government. It's an area that we need to be able to tap into in the fullness of time. And once we can be able to finalize the legislations that gives us authority to can be able to venture into that area, then we'll move into that area. And it means that we'll have to beef up our capacity because municipalities are quite huge. If you take the city of Johannesburg alone, it's quite, I think it has a staff complement of no less than 15,000. It's a humongous kind of institution. Now, if you were to take Gauteng alone, with Ekurhuleni, with Tshwane, with Johannesburg, the three, it's a huge task. With the kind of capacity we have, we may not be able to stretch even the surface.
And Gauteng has 5 regions actually, because it's Ekurhuleni.
I was mentioning the metros.
The metros, yeah.
But you do have aspirant metros like your Mohale, which could be a metro in the not so distant future. Sedibeng is but another one, already it's 5. Those are the 3 major areas. If you talk about West Rand and Sedibeng district, they're quite big, they're quite huge and very outstretched.
Do you feel that there is work that the PSC can do within municipalities?
Oh yes, yes.
Obviously, we've got a serious problem with municipalities.
Oh yes, there's quite a lot that needs to be done. Remember, you need to be able to set standards. In the first instance, there must be a national standard for all municipalities and provinces and all that to say, this is what is expected from the public servants. There's a saying in India that says that when you sweep a staircase, you start at the top. If you can be able to capture, or what a word I'm using, to capture the top, and ensure that we deal with them accordingly, making sure that their socialization, their education, and how they're being introduced into this rubric of the public service and indicate what is it that is expected from them in terms of conduct, we can cover quite a lot of ground. Remember, some of the problems that are there in municipalities, fortunately I've worked in a municipality, I know what it entails. There's, and forgive the words I use, there's a propensity from the politicians at that level to create an environment of corruption through inducement of sorts and interference in the administrative aspects.
Processes,
Whereas in the province, you would have a legislature which is completely detached from departments. There's no way that members of parliament would be involved in departments insofar as procurement processes are concerned. Whereas in the municipalities, it's just close proximity, could be in the same building. And the buddy-buddy kind of thing that happens there leads to these kinds of things happening, and becomes a problem because there's a lot of interference. So those are issues that we need to clarify and sort out, because when you look into the Public Finance Management Act and the Municipal Finance
Management Act,
there are similarities. But of course, your Section 57s and what have you in the municipalities have a way of finding the way through in doing all the untoward things. And we want to strengthen the hands of those that are dealing with these matters, and be able to create similar offices where we can be able to investigate those municipalities.
You seem very passionate about what you do. Would you call yourself a patriotic South African?
100%. I'm as patriotic as patriotism can be. I love my country. I would love to see things turning for the better in the country. I would love to see a country that is free from corruption, a country where people can be able to walk about freely without any fear, and people can then be able to report anything that is untoward freely, so that the matters can then be investigated. It's absolutely imperative that we create a country where national pride becomes the issue. You know, the broad South Africanism that we need to talk about is such that everyone must feel that I belong here, and we can be able to dispense or deal with our problems in a manner that is systematic, without fear, without favor, but with equity and fairness. It's absolutely imperative. We can't do otherwise except to do that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mavuso.
It's a pleasure indeed.
It has been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure indeed.
Well, guys, this is what you heard here from Mr. Mavuso, a very passionate guy about the work that he does and also about the country in general. Thank you.